So our next speaker is going to be Perry Carpenter, the Chief Evangelist and Strategy Officer of the company KnowBe4, the company that specializes in security awareness training for social engineering, spear phishing, ransomware attacks, and more. And so Perry will be talking about a little bit about the psychology involved in making a plan and how to reinforce good behaviors. So Perry, whenever you're ready, you can share your screen.
Yep. And thank you both for putting this on. This is a really great event, and I'm really proud to be a part of it, especially with the great lineup of speakers that you've managed to pull together. So congratulations on that, and thank everyone for attending today. My focus for the past decade or so, decade to 15 years, has really been around the intersection between human behavior and technology. Because what I witnessed, I think it really echoes some of the points that Dan made and even some of the points that Kristen made as well, is that humans, when they're put in certain situations, tend to not do the logical thing. They tend to kind of jump into different areas. And so the psychology behind why we do the things that we do and how we can help organizations work with human nature rather than against it to channel security behavior where we want it to go started to really become my focus, because over and over and over again, I saw organizations that had great technology at quote unquote keeping the bad guys out, but a really persistent attacker or a really negligent employee or contractor would kind of ruin all of that. And so what came up incessantly was the fact that we built this great line of defense on the technology side, but assuming that that something is going to slip through, there was no line of defense on the human side. And so my mission and my passion for a while now has been building up that last line of defense and having good practices and procedures and science behind how to do that effectively. And so when you think about this concept of security awareness, and I think Dan touched on this a little bit earlier, what you typically think about is throwing information at people and putting the right information in front of the right person and expecting the right outcome, which sounds great on paper. If we give somebody the right information, yeah, they'll feel morally bound to do it. But in reality, it doesn't work that way. In reality, we have to deal with this thing that I call the knowledge intention behavior gap. And what I mean by that is, even if we have the knowledge about something, the right way to do something, or that doing something is the right thing to do, even when we have that knowledge, we may not intend to act on it. We may just not care. I mean, the same way that a lot of us look at a speed limit sign that says 55 and we blatantly and intentionally go faster. Because we make our own little internal risk-based decisions about the environment that we're in. And end users do the same thing. We all do that. Even security professionals, with all the right knowledge, make risk-based decisions about what they're going to do at any given time. And sometimes security professionals are the most insecure people in their behavior. Because they feel like they're on top of the world, that they're above all of that, and that they'll just naturally react in the right way at the right time. So just because we have the knowledge doesn't mean that we intend to do it. There's also a gap between intention and behavior. And by that, I mean, even when we have all the right intention to do the right thing at the right time, the behavior may not follow. And all you have to do is look at New Year's resolutions to see that in action in each and every one of our lives. Because just about every year we say, this year I'm going to eat better, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to spend more time with my family, I'm going to save more money, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z with my education or career or self-care. And what we see staggeringly is that most everybody within 2 weeks of hitting that beginning of the year has not done any of those things, because the tyranny of the urgent overrides this kind of more strategic thinking that we have. And we make these little in-the-moment trade-offs. And those in-the-moment trade-offs are patterns, and they're based all around human behavior. So we have to effectively deal with the knowledge, intention, behavior gap if we ever expect to have effective security awareness. So out of the knowledge, intention, behavior gap flows what I call the three realities of security awareness. And I think you'll implicitly see where these map in. Number one is, just because I'm aware doesn't mean that I care. Number two is, if we try to work against human nature, we will fail, and we will every single time. And I'll pause there and say, for organizations that struggle with getting adherence to security policies, it's probably because your security policy is written in a way that doesn't account for human nature, or your security process is written in a way that doesn't account for human nature. It's either too hard, or people don't care about it, or a combination of both. And so we're going to talk about how to model behavior that starts to account for that. But for every policy that you're seeing that gap between your policy expectation and your behavioral reality, you really have to start looking at where is that breakdown happening. And it's usually because you're expecting people to not act like humans. And then lastly is, what our employees do is way, way, way more important than what they know. And I'll say this as starkly as I can. An employee's knowledge has never stopped a breach. The thing that stops a breach is their behavior, because I can have all the right knowledge in the world and still make a mistake, or I might not even know why I'm doing what I'm doing, but I unintentionally stop a breach, or it just feels like the right thing to do to have this behavior pattern, and I stop a breach. So the knowledge is important, but in my mind, the knowledge is secondary, unless the knowledge has built a behavior that will be repeated even when the person is not consciously thinking anymore about the action that they're about to take. So here's why that's true. There's a field of science called behavioral economics that was really pioneered by a guy named Daniel Kahneman, and a number of other people that we could touch on. But Daniel Kahneman really is the guy that gets the credit for really breaking it down and explaining it in a brass tacks type of way. And what Kahneman says is, there are two ways that we think as humans. There's a system one type of thinking and a system two type of thinking. And system one is very fast, it's emotion driven, and it's based on shortcuts, or what you might use a technical term for would be heuristics. So fast, emotionally based, and all around shortcuts. And if you think biologically and evolutionarily, that all makes sense, because for our own survival, in just a split second, we had to make life or death decisions. Your twig snap in the field or in the woods, and you don't react fast enough and get away from an apex predator, well, then you might die. Or if you don't react in the right moment to take down your prey, you might not eat. And so it really makes a lot of sense biologically. But fast forward to the century that we live in now, when we're really around all this technology, and so much of our life is easier in many ways than it has been. And what we find out is that those really quick decisions can lead us down a bad trail really fast if we click on a link or download an attachment or something else that is maliciously crafted. So in contrast to system one is system two. And system two is much slower. It is methodical, it takes effort, and you have to intentionally put yourself into it. So 95% of what we do in our days is based in system one. It's very reactionary. We don't even think about it. It's just our natural process. 5% is system two. And I'll give you an example of that really quick. So system one thinking is your mind immediately leaping and picking out one of these lines as being longer than the other. And now if you were to actually sit down and analyze it though, and start to think about it more critically, and use a little bit of geometry, what you'll see is that all the lines are actually the same length. But our minds typically leap forward and make a snap judgment based on all of the things that we talked about before. It's that heuristic driven mind can lead us into an illusion of reality that does not actually match up with the facts of the situation. Now, system 2 immediately feels slower, and I'll give you an example of that. Here's system 2. You see that, and I see that, and I have to immediately say, do I want to engage in it? And even if I say I want to engage in it, now I'm starting to think about, how do I make that easier on myself? And so my mind is always trying to push back into system 1. And so when I look at something like this, my mind is going, all right, how do I round that down a little bit? Maybe make 532, 530, make 86, 85, do that simple division, and then figure out how to deal with the remainders. So I'm always trying to figure out how to take shortcuts. To stay in system 2 takes long, sustained effort, and our brains just do not like it. So if we're starting then to figure out that we're dealing with this human nature issue, and if we want to get the security behaviors that we're hoping to get, the behaviors that will help create the protection within our organization that we're hoping for and reduce the risk in the way that we're hoping for, well, then what do? Well, we go back to rule number 2 of those 3 realities of security awareness, which is we have to think about human nature. And this is where Dr. BJ Fogg comes in. BJ Fogg is a research professor at Stanford University. He's consulted with just about all the top organizations around the world, both technology-based organizations and just strict consumer product goods organizations, on how to get people to do the things that the organization is hoping that they'll do. So he teaches a class in behavior design, actually has an entire department around behavior design, does a lot of theoretical research, but a lot of practical advising as well. And out of his class have come the founders of Instagram and a number of other, what we would call habit forming or engaging applications, these things that really just by design keep you scrolling or keep you tapping on your screen, because if you do, you know instinctively at some point that little release of dopamine from your brain is going to come and you're going to feel really good. That's why you end up on Facebook or Instagram for hours at a time just scrolling up, even though 9 out of 10 things that you see sucks and you don't want to engage with it. But that 1 out of 10 at a time that you don't expect it is just enough that your mind goes, ah, that's what I'm looking for. That feels good for a second. And then that keeps you going for longer. That's kind of the gambler's fallacy as well. That's what keeps people addicted to gambling. They've seen it pay off. Their brain feels that that chemical reaction when it does, and so it makes up for all the times that they lose because they know they have the possibility of getting that again. So Dr. Fogg says we humans are lazy, we're social, and we're creatures of habit. We don't like to spend effort when we don't have to. We are influenced by those around us, and we like to look good to those around us, and we like to do things the way that we've always done them. And if you think about it, all that makes sense when you think about system 1 and system 2. We're lazy because we don't want to enter system 2. We're creatures of habit because we don't want to enter system 2. But when we need to override that in some way, it's usually because we're doing it for the betterment of ourselves or society or some social cause. Now, what Dr. Fogg did is he built what I see as the E equals MC square of behavior design. And his formula is B equals MAP. And so that's behavior equals motivation, ability, and a prompt. So a behavior is something that happens when motivation, ability, and a prompt come together at the same time in the right amounts. So there's the right amount of motivation, there is the right level of ability, and then there's a prompt to do the behavior at the time when those things are synced up. And of course, motivation can range from being lowly motivated for something to very highly motivated. And things can range from being very easy to do to very difficult to do. And so that correlation that exists there is that if something's pretty easy to do, it doesn't take a lot of motivation for me to do it. I just have to have that prompt, either you asking me to do it, or a notification on my phone asking me to engage, or if the prompt is that I am hungry, well then just, that hunger is an internal prompt for me to go, do something like eat, if the behavior is eating. So the ease of that is important, or the ability factor is important, and then the motivation piece is important. For me to do something that's really, really hard, I have to have a lot more motivation to engage in it. The other thing we need to realize is, and I like what Dr. Fogg did here, is that there's some gaps that are built into this. Is there's some areas where something can be so hard that regardless of how much I'm motivated, I cannot do it. Like, let's say I want to impress my kids, and there is a 700-pound rock out in the woods that we've been exploring, and I see that rock, and they're like, "Dad, go pick up that rock. Show us how strong you are." I could have all the motivation in the world. I could have my kids being the best cheerleaders in the world, but I don't have the ability to do that on my own. I might be able to bring in some tools like a forklift or something, or get a lever system built up or something. I can build some tools to make that task easier, but the task as it exists right now is insurmountable for me, regardless of my level of motivation. And so, I might get frustrated if I'm overly prompted to do that and I just can't achieve it. Same thing for ability. If something is really, really easy to do, but my motivation is bottomed out, I just won't do it. I mean, you see this all the time with people that are depressed and basic self-care. It's pretty easy to get up and brush your teeth, or to drink water when you need to, or so on. But if somebody hits that point of absolute depression for whatever reason, then they may not do it. And the same thing there is happening in security behaviors all the time. So let me just give you a couple ways to think about behavior when it comes to security and the way that we design our programs. So the first thing is, when we're designing behavior, we have to be really, really specific and think about what behaviors, if we were to adopt them, are going to have the greatest benefit to the organization. And don't pick too many. You want 3 to 5 so that you can effectively focus on them. You can focus on more, but the key is you need to be able to intentionally focus on that with your organization. The second question is to really understand, is that a single behavior, or is that a collection of behavior? So if we were to say the behavior is phishing, I would tell you that's not a single behavior. I don't want my people to engage with phishing is a collection of behaviors, because once I say I want better phishing hygiene, then I have a behavior of I want people not to click on a link without interrogating the link. I want people to not trust senders without interrogating the header of an email. I want people to not, by reflex, download attachments. If they download attachments, I want them to think about the attachment, maybe interrogate that a little bit before they open it. And if they open it and it's asking them to enable macros, I don't want them to do that. So I just listed off several different behaviors. And there are even more within the discipline or the hygiene of staying safe from phishing. And so you have to get really, really specific and crispify each of those behaviors that are there so that you can build the program that will effectively train the people with each of those sub behaviors that you need to tackle. And then lastly, you have to think about, is this a behavior that I can even take on right now? Is our organization Do we have the right appetite for it? And an example there would be, maybe you don't want people to tailgate without badging in. That's a great behavior, because that is a good security control. Is I don't want people that are unauthorized within the boundaries of my office building whenever we go back to the office. So let's say you take that on, but your executive team from 8 to 8:30 every morning is just, smiling and holding the door open for everybody as they get to the office. Well, that means you can't effectively train on that behavior, because you have a culture problem that you have to deal with first. And so first, before you take that on with the general population of the organization, you have other work that you need to go take care of with the executive team to make sure that they're bought in, and that that's a behavior that they are going to support from the top down, from the messaging that's out there to their actions. So here's what the Fogg behavior model would look like if I broke it down into a worksheet, just trying to model something as simple as drinking water. So the behavior is drink a glass of water. The motivation could be, one of many. The person could be thirsty. They might want social acceptance if everybody at their table is drinking water. They might want to avoid offending somebody that's offering them water. They might believe that there's good positive health benefits in choosing water over the other thing that might be available, and so on. So what would affect motivation and ability? Well, a glass of water has to be available or obtained with very little effort. The person's mouth can't be taped shut, right? Because they could have all the motivation in the world, but they're not going to be able to do that thing at the right time, because it's just physically not possible. And then also on ability, the person can't be asleep or otherwise incapacitated. Or let's say I want to drink a glass of water right now, but I'm in the middle of giving a webinar, and it would be rude for me to break away and go to the refrigerator. Well, I technically have the ability to do it, but I have something pushing that down a little bit. And it's also demotivating me, because I don't want to be rude. And then, so on the prompts side of things, then we get into, how does the person even, make that decision to have the intersection between motivation and ability and do the behavior or not? And that's where prompts come in. And so a prompt can be either internal or external. An internal prompt would be just me noticing that I'm thirsty. An external motivation might be you offering me a glass of water, or a health app saying, hey, have you drank a glass of water within the past X amount of time, or so on. So all of these kind of things can come into play. And as Dan mentioned, there is a component of messaging within security awareness, and we have to do the messaging in the right way for the messaging to actually stick. And so he talked about gamification. I'll say yes, and emotion. If I were to pick one of the 4 Trojan horses of the mind that I put in here, I would land on emotion every time, because we remember the things that make us emote. And I would say something potentially controversial too, which is, we remember the things that make us emote in a negative way more than we remember the things that make us emote in a positive way. Yeah, dopamine can come in on the positive side and everything else. But I've seen a lot of security awareness content that's geared at making people laugh or keeping people at a neutral state. Usually, I mean, traditional security awareness was all about vanilla neutral states. Newer security awareness that you see out there that focuses on information is all about making people laugh. But think about how many times you laugh every day and you don't even remember why or what somebody said that did it, but you probably laughed 40, 50, 60 times a day, and you don't necessarily remember why. It's just a blur. But you remember a little bit of an emotional dip below your baseline. And so I think good security awareness content should, yes, it should ride the highs, but it should also not be afraid to talk about the depths. Because when we do that piece of empathy that makes us human can kick in a different and unique way, and the power of story can make that embed within our minds in a way that nothing else can. And so don't be afraid to use those emotional waves, and use every bit of emotion that you can when you start to tell the stories or the anecdotes that you have, or you try to communicate the message that needs to be communicated. The other thing, when we get into science, there's a concept called nudging, and I'm running out of time, so I'll just build this out and give you a quick rundown of what this is, and then I'll go maybe 2 more minutes and then stop for some questions. So nudging is all about thinking about all the choices that somebody has, not restricting any of those, but doing psychological pushes that would get them to be more likely to do the thing that you want them to do. So this first one, I apologize for the females on the call, but I'll just say men's restrooms are disgusting. If you are a guy and you're going into a restroom, you have to take a risk assessment of the floor every time you go in there. And what this German sanitation engineer realized when he was looking at the urinals and dealing with this phenomenon called splashback, yeah, there's a technical name for that. He said, men are disgusting. That's a foregone conclusion. But he also realized men are basically just really big grown-up children. And so his revelation was, oh, I can take this little plastic fly and I can super glue it in the urinal and give men something to aim at, because they're now, they've gamified urination, and that person is more likely to play target practice than to be absent-minded. And he decreased that phenomenon of splashback by over 90%. So very, very successful. Didn't say you can't pee anywhere you want in the bathroom, but he made it more psychologically engaging to get the person's aim involved. The second one, a little bit cleaner in that we're moving away from bathroom now, but around the environment. If I want people to make good environmentally conscious decisions, I can nudge them in that direction. And if you look at this is throwing something away. At the point of behavior, I can inject a nudge. The way that this was done is the use of language. So in those Trojan horses of the mind, you saw me say words and story, and visuals. And so they're doing both of those. And what you see here is that at the point of decision, you are going to see the ultimate destination of the action that you're about to take. So landfill, that's where the things in that side are going to go. And now you get this nasty picture of a dumpster disgorging its contents into a landfill. And your mind is going, do I want to contribute to that? Or can I make a better, more informed choice? And so here on the other side, you've got recycle, which is a clean word, versus landfill, which is kind of a dirty sounding word as well, with dirty implications. Recycle is in green. It's the color of life in giving and new things. You also have the pictures of the types of things that you can recycle, and they're almost, they've almost got a little bit of like a halo type of glow around them. So there's a lot of little suggestions coming in. This third one is from one of the local grocery stores that I went into about a year ago, and they're trying to make kids have healthy eating choices. And so they don't want kids to instinctively choose checkout aisle candy, but maybe make a better choice. And so if their hunger is satiated by the time they get to the checkout, then they might not scream for a Snickers bar or whatever. And so they put free fruit at the very front of the store. And I'll be honest, I don't know that works very well, but hey, it's an example of a nudge, and it's a good try. This last one here is really pretty good, because most of us want to do good things in the world. We want to do good things for other people. It's just so often it's inconvenient, and the times that people ask us to do it aren't the right times, or we don't trust the people that are asking us to do it. If somebody just calls your cell phone and says, hey, would you like to give to Children's Miracle Network? You might not answer the phone because you don't recognize the number. You might not trust the person on the other side and believe that is the real Children's Miracle Network. you might not have the time, and you might just be time crunched and say, I've only got 30 seconds. I can't deal with this now. I'll go to the website later. And of course you forget and you never do. But at my local Walmart, within the self-checkout, they injected the ability to give to charity. And now it makes it so easy because you have to do something at that prompt no matter what. You have to either do the thing that you know and believe that you want to do for the world, or you have to explicitly say, I'm not going to do that. Now, there's also another pressure here in that, imagine if you just put $300 worth of groceries over that scanner and into your bags, and you see this prompt around, hey, would you like to help stop world hunger? How much of a trash bag would you feel like if you didn't say, I can give $1 to end world hunger after you just spent $300 on groceries, for people that can afford that, of course. There is a lot of good that can happen. The thing that all of these will fight against at the end of the day, and they are very, very effective, but the thing that we always have to keep in mind, even with all these great nudges and prompts and everything else, is that our mind is always trying to go back to system one, and it's always trying to filter out the environment around us to help us focus on the important thing. And so every prompt that we send, every prompt that we see will inevitably become invisible to the brain if it's overused. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the presentation a little bit before the last slide, just so we have a chance for some questions.
Awesome. So thank you so much. Unfortunately, we do have to move on to our next presentation,
Okay.
But Catherine and I are going to figure out a way that we can potentially get people's questions answered. Would you be open to people reaching out to you afterwards with their questions? Because we do have
Absolutely.
some fun ones.
Yeah.
Okay. We have some ones about magic here, as well as some other more technical ones, but I know people want to get responses to those later. But again, thank you. And Catherine, you can take it away.
Thank you.